Alright, so this is something you guys have seen me use for about the last three and a half months here. And now that I have had plenty of use with it, I feel that I have enough experience with it and kind of know all the ins and outs of it, and I feel I can do a solid review on it. So that's what we're doing today. This is the Hi-Lux Pentalux. It is the Tac VF 4-20 G2. I see a lot of people do reviews on things where they'll pull them out of the box, have literally no experience with them, go over the basic features, and then call that a review. And in my personal opinion, if you haven't taken the time to actually experience the product, learn all the ins and outs of it, then you really don't have a place yet to actually review that product. So that's what I feel like I've done here, as I've been using this and using it very heavily over the last few months here. So like I said, this is the Hi-Lux Pentalux. That is the Tac VF 4-20 G2. So we'll go over all the specs of this thing first, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. So first off, the magnification range. Obviously it is a 4-20 magnification range. I think personally 4-20 is probably one of the best magnification range you can have. 20 power is more than enough to do almost any type of long-range precision shooting. As a matter of fact, I had no problem, if you guys saw the video, taking this thing out to 2,061 yards on the 6 Creed here, so which takes a lot of elevation to get out to those types of distances. As a matter of fact, I think in that video where I did that shot, I actually had the magnification dialed back to right around 18 power just to get that little bit of extra holdover in the reticle to get on target, and still had absolutely no problem getting on plate out to those distances with just that amount of magnification. 4 power, the low end. 4 power is an awesome magnification range for a lot of different variable things like hunting. If you are looking for a do-it-all scope, 4-20 power is a great range for that. 4 power, you can have a low enough magnification that if you're in the woods, you have a much closer up shot. You can dial something down to 4 power, and that gives you the ability to really be able to have a large sight picture on 4 power. This thing does come with a throw lever that you can just screw on. There's a little plug in here. You unscrew it, screw the throw lever that comes with it in, so it makes it very, very fast to go from 4 to 20 power magnification. The turrets on this thing. When I first opened the box, the very first thing that I noticed about this scope was the turrets. I was extremely impressed by how large these turrets were. As a matter of fact, they've got 12 full mils per rotation. So some of the scopes, my other scopes that I have around this price point, actually have 10 power. 10 power, sorry, not 10 power, have 10 full mils of rotation, of tracking per rotation. This thing has 12 mils per rotation, and that actually does a couple of things. This thing has no zero stop, so because it has no zero stop, you're able to put a 20 MOA rail on here, and I feel like, and we'll talk about it here in a second, they, instead of putting some money into things like zero stop for the price point, we'll go over the price too here, but I feel like for the price point of this thing, instead of putting some money into things like a zero stop, they put in money into other things that matter quite a bit more, in my personal opinion, and did some things to make it so that zero stop isn't such a big issue. So first off, the 12 mils per one rotation, you get about 2.5 rotations, full rotations, for the entire turret, for the entire elevation range. So by putting a 20 MOA rail under this thing, I was able to have 18.5 mils up and then 6.2, I think, down. So the 20 power made it so that, or the 20 MOA rail made it so that if I was to dial all the way down, I can't get a full rev off, a full revolution off of my tracking. So I am able to bottom out without being a full revolution off. So even without that zero stop, with just a 20 MOA rail, which most people, if you're shooting long range, you're going to have at least 20 MOA underneath your scope. So that allowed me to not be able to bottom out and not go a full rev off, so you're not going to get lost in your tracking. So therefore the zero stop is not a huge issue. So the amount of tracking in this thing, so first off, if you guys saw the video I did a tracking test the other day. We did a 10 mil tracking test, and I have tracked, I set up a true stick. I'll show you guys, check the video out. I tracked this scope on the true stick, and I've tracked quite a few scopes since I set that thing up, quite a few of my other scopes, some that cost a significant amount more than this, and out of all those scopes, this is the only one that passed at 100%, and that is really amazing, especially for the price that this thing costs. Typically scopes that cost a significant amount more will have at least 1% error in their tracking, and if you guys see the tracking test, this thing was dead on 100% perfect. Beyond that, the clicks in the turret, this is something that I hear people say in scope reviews, and it's like, okay, what does that mean? The clicks are super tactile. Well, I can honestly say these clicks are extremely tactile. They actually feel better than almost any scope I have. I may have one scope that has clicks that feel as good as this. As you can hear, they're definitely audible and extremely tactile, for whatever that's worth. I always get irritated when I hear people say that, but you can absolutely say that about the clicks on this turret. So the amount of tracking that this thing has is 80 MOA. So they give you the tracking in the manual in minute of angle, but it has 80 MOA total tracking. Now that's what it's supposed to have, and typically if you guys shoot long range or use your scopes to their fullest extent, you know that typically if something says it has a certain amount, typically it has a little bit more than that. And there's a reason that scope manufacturers give you a lower number than what you're actually able to dial on your scope. One of the reasons that they give you a lower amount is because of the internal mechanisms in here. By going over that amount of adjustment, you can put a lot of stress on the mechanisms inside the scope and really kind of tear up some of those mechanisms. And if you bottom it out and take it all, take it all the way up or all the way down and bottom it out, you can really put a lot of stress on those things, which is something that can throw the tracking off or do a lot of things that you don't want. So something that I've noticed that they did in this scope, so even though this thing is supposed to only have 22.2 mils, I actually got 24.6 total mils of tracking out of this thing. And then even with that being more than the amount of elevation tracking that this thing was supposed to have, beyond that, it has a handful of dead clicks on either end. So what that does is that takes away that ability to put that extra stress on the mechanism. So even if you use the entire magnification or the entire elevation range of this scope, you're not going to put that extra stress on the mechanisms inside this and tear up your scope on as far as your tracking on the inside. So that is one thing that I was extremely impressed with when I realized that I could dial this thing up to its maximum amount and then see that it had a handful of dead clicks. I think it was about 1.5 mils on either direction. So had they put those in there, yeah, you would have another 3 mils of tracking, but you'd be putting all that extra stress on the internals of the scope. And then as far as windage wise, they give you 60 MOA. Now I haven't checked I've not had any reason to dial the full amount of windage in either direction, but I'm assuming it probably has some dead clicks in it as well. And it gives you 16.7 mils of windage, and like I said, I'm sure there's a little bit more than that in either direction. Because like I said, I feel like they, instead of putting the extra money into things like zero stop, they put that money into things that I feel personally matter more. We'll talk about glass quality next. Now this thing, for the price point of this scope, has some absolutely unbelievably high quality glass. So just like this thing tracks better than some of the scopes that I have that cost more, this thing has better glass than almost any of my scopes. I may have one scope that has glass quality that is better than this, and then I have one scope that probably equals this. But as far as glass quality, this is top-notch glass. In the fact that you have seen me do many extreme long-range shots with this thing, and have absolutely no trouble in spotting my own misses and getting on target. So when you're able to do that at those types of distances, and do it and completely be able to, and clearly be able to see where those bullets are landing, so that you can make the corrections and get on target, the glass quality is very high. Beyond that, I've actually set this up next to some scopes that were around the same price point, and of scopes that were around this same price point, I've a way to do kind of a clarity test of glass. You can take something that typically has something that usually I use something shiny, like a box of an ammo box or a bullet box. Like Hornady makes those bullet boxes that are nice and shiny. You take one of those and set it down at 50 yards, dial your parallax into where it's as clear as you can get, and then look at it through multiple scopes, and whichever one you can really make out the finer details with, that's a way that you can really tell which scopes have higher glass quality. And a lot of people, you'll see people look at, like if you go to look at scopes in a store and you'll say, hey, let me see that, and you see people looking around under ambient light in a store, it's really hard to tell glass quality. You really need to do that outside under actual sunlight to be able to tell glass quality, and this has some extremely high quality glass. Parallax in this thing. So this thing, Parallax, is another thing about this scope that really makes it a very versatile scope, as far as just like the 4 to 20 power, giving you enough magnification range and being low enough and high enough to pretty much be a do-it-all scope. This thing parallaxes all the way down to 10 yards, and it says 10 yards, and it actually does. I have checked that at 10 yards, and the parallax goes from 10 yards all the way to infinity. So by doing that, by giving you 10 yards, and then all the way up, this is a great scope if you were wanting to do something like shoot the 22, PR 22 PRS style matches or NRL 22 style matches. This would be an awesome scope for those types of matches. Has plenty of adjustment and parallaxes down to those closer targets. So you can see all the fine details of the targets and the bullet holes that you're making at whatever range. So that is something that you don't see, especially in scopes of this price point. A lot of times they may go down to 25 yards or 30 yards, somewhere in there. But to parallax all the way down to 10 yards, and it actually works at 10 yards, is a very useful thing, and also a very useful thing in a hunting scenario. So you've got a scope that will go down to 4 power magnification and parallax down to 10 yards. So it wouldn't matter what range that animal is at. If you run up on an animal very closely in the woods, you can be sure that you can get a clear sight picture. So that is another thing that made this thing a very good all-around scope. For just about any situation. It does have an illuminated reticle. They actually come, you can order this in green or red. This is actually the green, and I've seen people, there's always a debate on which one is better, green or red, and to me it honestly doesn't matter, but having the ability to pick either green or red is an awesome thing, because some people are able to see green better. Some people are able to see red better. I think it just really matters on what you personally prefer. But having the ability to have your illuminated reticle in either one is another awesome thing about this. The fast focus eyepiece. Typically, most scopes come with most of these scopes in this type of price range come with a fast focus eyepiece. This fast focus eyepiece is different than most scopes I've run across. So first off, I'll give you guys a little backstory on this. I went out to shoot one of the I think the 1900 and whatever, I think 70 some yard shot that I did with this. I went out to shoot it, and I wear contacts, and I realized when I got out there that I had forgot to put my contacts in that morning. And any of you guys who shoot long range, especially if you wear glasses, know that having a good diopter or fast focus eyepiece, whatever you want to call it, in your scope is an essential if you want to take your glasses off and shoot and get a clear picture through your scope. This thing has an enormous amount of adjustment in the diopter. So as you can see, this thing goes from, I do believe, like -3 to +3 in the diopter, and I was able to, with no contacts in, and without contacts I have pretty terrible vision, was able to, without any issue, dial this diopter out to a point where it was absolutely perfect for me, and made up for the missing contacts that I didn't have in that day. So that was another thing that I was really impressed with, and it's one of those things that if I hadn't spent that extra amount of time using this scope before just jumping in and doing a review, that's one of those things that I probably would have missed, because I wouldn't have used it like I did that day, accidentally walking out there without my contacts in. Another thing is this thing has 3.6 inches of eye relief for that perfect scope picture with no scope shadow. Now that is something that I actually prefer 4 inches or better, or at around 4 inches. 3.6 is really close to that. I have not found any issues in that 3.6 inches, but that is less than some other scopes. But also you've got to figure this diopter adjusts out so much that you may make up for that in some ways. So 3.6 inches is less than a lot of other scopes in this area, but definitely does not hurt it in my opinion. Now, if you were putting this on something very hard recoiling rifle like a 50 BMG or something like that has a minimal muzzle brake or something, you may have to worry about getting scope bite. But in most cases, on most rifles you're going to put this on, 3.6 inches is absolutely more than enough as far as eye relief. So the reticle in this thing is the CW1 reticle. Now the reticle in this thing was something that I found that I had, was kind of a love-hate thing. So the reticle is probably my one main critique of this scope. That reticle has some really good things about it and some things that I was not so fond of. So the one thing that I was really liked about this reticle, and I will actually probably be, from this point on, most scopes that I pick out, I will be looking for a reticle with this feature, is the fact that this has, instead of most scopes that I own to this point, have some sort of a crosshair for the aiming point in the center. This has a center dot. Now I've used scopes with center dots before, but not as extensively enough to know that it was my preferred type of aiming point. So this thing having that center dot, it has a very fine dot in the center, and then it has, I think, a 0.2 of a mil gap in every direction around that, so that you have a very nice fine aiming point to focus on. And especially when I'm doing things like shooting at pop cans at 1,000 yards or whatever I'm doing, it gives you a really nice fine aiming point to put right on where you want that bullet to go, and gives you something to really focus on. So that was something that I really liked about this CW1 reticle, was that nice fine center dot aiming point. And another thing that I thought was just fine about this reticle was the fact that it has windage wise, on the main plane, so the main cross axis, main horizontal axis, it has a hash mark every 0.2 of a mil, I think out to 5 mils, which is plenty for wind holds and plenty enough subtensions to really fine tune your wind holds at any distance on your windage. But if you go vertically, one of my main critiques is vertically, as far as elevation corrections in the reticle, it only has a hash mark every 1/2 of a mil. So if you're going to do holdovers, which is something that doing these extremely long shots, I'm using a lot of holdovers in the reticle typically, when I run out of elevation in my turret especially. So I was having to find a spot in the reticle in my holdover to hold that and then fine tune it to that exact spot with my turret, dialing it up a couple of tenths or down a couple of tenths to really fine tune that point of aim in my holdover. So that's something that I really wish was different. I wish it had just like the windage turret, or just like the windage part of the reticle, it has every 2 tenths some sort of hash mark. I wish this had that in the elevation as well, which it doesn't, and that's probably one of my main critiques about it. And beyond that, it does not have any sort of Christmas tree. Now, because I use holdovers a lot, I like to have the ability to, now most of the time I'm dialing my wind, but when the wind is very dynamic and changing back and forth, it is really helpful sometimes to have that Christmas tree style reticle. Now, I don't like it too busy, but I like to at least be something there to give me a reference point to hold on at the different elevations in the reticle as far as holdovers. So that is the 2 main critiques that I have. Those are probably my 2 biggest critiques of this scope, is the fact that the reticle only has hash marks every half mil in the elevation, and then no sort of Christmas tree style, Horus style reticle with windage holds in the holdovers. So beyond that, everything about this scope was something that I found to my liking. When you buy this scope, in the box it's going to come with, it actually comes with scope caps, which are always pretty well essential on most scopes, or on any scope. It's really good to protect your glass. And the scope caps on this, I will say, are probably the nicest scope caps, nicer than most scope caps that you can buy. And the way that these attach, they actually screw on, and they kind of have a locking ring here. Let's see if I can take it off. They have kind of a locking ring here on the inside, which allows you to take the scope cap on and off, but really give you the ability with this little turning locking ring here to lock it down so that you can open the scope cap in any direction that you want. If you want it to open this way, I have it opening this way actually, so I'm not blocking my level on this side. And I was able to do that with these scope caps. The way that they're set up so that you can set them up in any direction that you want. And then also they have, instead of like a lot of the Butler Creek or the other cheaper scope caps that you can just buy to put on any sort of rifle, these are actually magnetic. So that was something that I found really helpful. You close them, they have a very small magnet in them that just keeps them closed. Was something that I found very helpful with the scope caps that come on this. It also comes with a throw lever, so just a very small little throw lever that, I think I already said this, but just a small little throw lever. There's a little plug in here, and you can unscrew that plug, and the throw lever in the box screws right in, and you have a throw lever. So if you're shooting some sort of PRS competition and you are really, or hunting, and you need to adjust your magnification on the fly very quickly, you have the ability to do that with the throw lever. This thing comes with a warranty, just like most scopes nowadays. Now, I do not believe, if I'm wrong, I will put this in the video, but I do not believe that it is a transferable warranty. So if you are the original purchaser of this scope, then the warranty is only for you. It comes with a warranty card that you send in when you purchase the scope, and then that warranty stays with the original purchaser, I do believe. Price point on this thing is $575 if you buy it from Hi-Lux, and then you can also find this scope from Optics Planet, and you can actually get it a little bit cheaper. Now, I don't know why they price them differently, but they have, from Optics Planet, there's 2 price points. Same exact scope. The only difference that I see on the 2 choices in Optics Planet are the reticle or the illuminated reticle choices. So the green illuminated reticle comes in at about $540, whereas the red illuminated reticle is $570. So just like we talked about its preference on which one you like, they're about a $30 difference in the price point of just choosing the illuminated reticle from Optics Planet. And beyond that, the only other thing that I can say about this is, yes, this is made in China. This scope is a Chinese-made scope, and if you guys have not been paying attention, over if this was 6 years ago, the scopes coming out of China would not equal up to American and Japanese made scopes of today, or German made scopes, or anything like that. But in the last probably 6 years, scopes have come such a long way from China. China has really upped their game in their manufacturing of scopes, and of really all optics. And they are now producing optics that rival Japanese optics in glass quality, in construction, in absolutely every way, for a lower price point. So to get a scope of this quality from a Japanese manufacturer is going to cost you a significant amount more. And the fact that you pay what you pay for this scope and get as high a quality glass as you're getting, like I said, this thing has, and I've put this next to Japanese quality glass, and it was just as good. The fact that you can get that out of a scope of this price point is pretty incredible, and I really look forward to the things that are going to be coming out of some of these Chinese scope manufacturers. Now, I know there's the whole China discussion and all that, and feel how you may about that, but I will say that their production quality in their scopes has improved tenfold in probably just the last 5 short years. So that is something that, to me, is not a big issue now. Years ago, I would not have picked a scope that was produced in China, but this thing, and I actually have other scopes, a lot of the Athlon scopes, most of the Athlon scopes are Chinese-made scopes, and they also have a very good reputation for higher quality. So I think that is an old talking point. I hear a lot of people still use that as something to downgrade scopes for, oh, it's made in China. But I think they need to catch up with the times, because scope quality coming out of China has caught up to the rest of the world nowadays. So this is a very high quality scope for spending under $600 any way you cut it. To get a scope of this quality, like I said, you would spend a significant amount more from any other place. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope this was helpful. I hope you guys are looking for a pretty much do-it-all scope, something that if you have more than one rifle and you're looking for a scope that you can just swap from one rifle to another, or scope that's going to be your hunting scope and also your long-range precision scope, and maybe your 22 match scope. This scope is a scope that can literally do it all. So I think this is kind of I think Hi-Lux, they're very well known for their repro scopes, their old Unertal reproduction scopes and things like that. Some of the older I can't even think of the name of them, but a lot of their old reproduction style scopes, and we'll throw some of them up here so you guys can see. But I think they have jumped head first into the tactical style scopes and done an amazing job at it. So I hope you guys found this helpful. Hope you guys are looking for scopes. You guys may look at these and consider them, because in my personal opinion, you guys have seen me use this out to some extreme distances and have absolutely no issues with it. And this scope has probably found its home here on my 6 Creedmoor for the foreseeable future. So I hope you guys enjoy this. We'll see you guys next time. I'm out.